We are on. All right. Praise God. We're on today. Enoch. Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but are we on page 163? Yes. All righty. Always have to ask that because my book is marked up everywhere, and I want to make sure it's not an old marking. All right. So here we are on Enoch, on 76. Chapter 76, verse 1. Now this next series of that we're talking about Enoch, we're back to Luminaries again, and it's very difficult to understand what's being said. But we got to go through it. We got to look at it, and then once we finish this luminary sun and moon and stars thing, then we get into the visions and dreams, and that's going to be really interesting when we get into visions and dreams. But we'll plug through today and try to get through these pages with some kind of knowledge and understanding what Enoch is trying to say here. And then, like I've always said before, Enoch is talking about, what he's seeing, but we, some of it is probably cryptic, some of it symbolism, and we didn't live in the day of Enoch, so we don't know how they communicated and how they talked about things. Because you're going to see things in here where they call the sun two different names, which is probably really dealing with the seasons, the winter sun and the summer sun. And that might have been common in those days, that when the sun changes, they give it a different name. So that may be one of the things to do. Like the moon, they give it like 4 different names and stuff like that. But obviously, they know it's the same moon. So why are they giving it 4 different names? And it probably has to do with the major phase changes of the moon. And so that may be been really common in Enoch's day that they did that. And there's been some research done on it that shows that even you look those words up in Hebrew, and it does kind of fit that theory that they're talking about the different intensities of light of the sun and the moon. And they give them different names. So we'll see that today. Okay, verse 1. At the ends of the earth I saw 12 portals open to all the quarters of heaven, from which the winds go forth and blow over the earth. 3 of them are open on the face, that's the east of the heavens, and 3 in the west, and 3 on the right, which is the south of the heaven, and 3 on the left, which is the north. So you got 12 portals. Now what does it mean by portals? We've talked about this before. Is that just major phases of the cycling of the cosmics, or is it actually gates to heaven, whatever? Because we do know that the bad angels entered in at Mount Hermon, which is in northern Israel. And did they come in that way because it's a gate or a portal? Maybe. Or are these gates or portals just describing the major phase changes of the sun and the moon as the earth even circles the sun? We don't know. It said in verse 3, and the 3 first are those of the east, and 3 of the north, and 3 of those on the left of the south, and 3 of the west. Through 4 of these comes winds of blessings and prosperity. So 4 of these. So basically it is saying here that there's like 12 portals, but in each direction there's at least one set of winds that blow that's a blessing. And if you ever looked at a weather map, winds go in all directions, all over a weather map. And you wonder why. How does the wind do that? What's causing the wind to go this way and this way and this way and everything in between all over the world? And I really noticed it when I was in Israel last week, because the BBC, which is the only English-speaking station you can get on Israeli television, weather program was showing weather all over the world. And they had the little arrows showing the winds going this way and the winds going that way. And I was amazed to watch all the different directions the winds go on the earth. And according to the Enoch here, there are angels controlling those things. And so you can't describe any physical phenomenon that causes that. Scientists today don't have any idea what causes the winds to do what they do. They know when wind blows when there is a barometric differential pressure that causes wind to blow. So if you got pressure at one value here, another, and a lower value here, the wind's going to move toward the lower value. They know that. But what causes those barometric differentials all over the earth, nobody knows. So that's why even Yeshua says nobody knows where the wind comes from or where it blows. Now, I'm sure Yeshua knows now, but it wasn't revealed to him at the time. So, according to the book of Enoch, angels are assigned these portals and winds to make things, weather, seasons, rain, hail, and all that to occur. When we first read these things, we look at it and go, that is just utter nonsense, you know, but don't dismiss it, because we didn't live in the time of Enoch, and we don't know how these things were described back then when Enoch wrote these things down. So, anyway, verse 4, through 4 of these came winds of blessing and prosperity, and from those remaining 8, hurtful winds. And when they are sent, they bring destruction on the earth and on the water upon it, and all who dwell therein, and on everything which is in the water, and all the land. So when they are sent, that means something sends the wind. All right, so we know that angels control the winds, but obviously they're obedient to whatever the Lord says. The Lord is ultimately responsible for all this stuff. And these hurtful winds, you know, we know them all. It's tornadoes, hurricanes, typhoons, all these kind of things, you know, that can be very hurtful upon the earth. So I thought that was very interesting that 4 winds were winds of prosperity are good for us, and 8 winds are bad for us. And so you can understand that when we get hurricanes coming from the east through the Atlantic and hit the west here, or the Caribbean or whatever, that's one of them strange wind directions. And what causes that? What causes the eye of a hurricane, or to even be formed like that? You know, how can they be formed like that?
Could it cause one of those to be judgments?
Yeah, well, we know it does. Absolutely, Jim. We know that Jim asked, you know, can they be for judgment? Absolutely. There have been people who have written books and tracked these things, and one of the things they written about and tracked was our dealings with Israel. Every time we do something that hurts Israel, you can expect within days some natural disaster to hit the United States. And all through the time of the Bushes and Obama, every time they did something to Israel, like cause them to come out of the Gaza, or other things that is hurtful to them, the United States has been hit by a major hurricane. And so, yeah, they're sent by God. They're judgments of God. That's exactly what they are. They're judgments of God. And it's, you know, and then of course, you know, just sin in itself, like when New Orleans was one of the most wicked cities in the country, got hit by that terrible hurricane. And people get all up in arms, get their hackles up and everything else when we suggest that. But if he did not spare the world because of wickedness, except for Noah and his family, and he did not spare Sodom and Gomorrah except for Lot, it's silly for us to think that God doesn't send judgment. He does send judgment. Now there are people out there who say, well, since Yeshua, God doesn't do stuff like that until it's time for judgment. I disagree. I think God constantly operates and moves in judgment on this world all the time. We see it. And just because Yeshua is here, God's just not going to wink at wickedness. And he will send judgment. Just as we know, in the last days, even before Yeshua leaves that throne, when the transgressors are full, the king of fierce countenance will come upon the earth. Now that's like the worst of all the judgments this world will ever face, the king of fierce countenance. So I don't agree with those teachers who teach that way. You know, God does judge today. Absolutely judges today. All right. Verse 5. And the first wind from those portals, called the east wind, I thought it was very interesting how they call it the first portals. Called the east wind, comes forth through the first portal, which is in the east, inclining toward the south. Then it comes forth, and from it comes forth desolation, drought, heat, and destruction. So the east wind comes and then moves toward the south. So quite often in the Bible, the term east wind is always an indication of judgment of God. And so when you see phrases like the east wind will blow, that's an indication of judgment. Now, where did the Bible get that idea? Where did the Bible get the idea that the east wind was for judgment? Well, it might have been right from Enoch, right here is where they got it from. Many years ago, when the Chinese came up with their first intercontinental missiles, nuclear-tipped intercontinental missiles, they were called the east wind. When I heard that, I thought, oh, that's not good. And then we always heard about the kings of the east. Such destruction comes from the east, out of Revelation. So I wonder if they got all those ideas from right here. 6, and through the second portal, in the middle comes what is fitting, and there it comes, so this is a good one, comes rain, fruitfulness, and prosperity, and dew, and through the third portal, which lies toward the north, comes cold and drought. So we know cold, when the wind comes from the north, it gets cold. We know that. And verse 7, after these come forth the south winds through 3 portals, and through the first portal of them inclining to the east comes forth a hot wind. And it makes sense. If it's hot down south and the winds come up from the south, it's going to be hot wherever you're at. The Santa Ana winds in California that causes such destruction and dryness and drought and fires and all that kind of stuff. What direction do the Santa Ana winds come from? East. That's correct. They come from the east. And so it's not the nice cool breeze that comes out of the west. It comes from the east, the Santa Ana winds. And of course, the typical physical description of that is that wind comes through that Mojave Desert and gets heated up and very dry, then it flows over into California from the east. And that may be exactly how it works. But we know when the Santa Ana winds blow, California is going to be in trouble. Last year, all those fires they had in California were due to Santa Ana winds blowing from the east. It certainly sounded like judgment to me. So, interesting. Okay. Verse 8, and through the middle portal next to it, there comes forth the fragrant smiles and dew and rain. I don't know what it means by the fragrant smiles, other than that when you have a nice rain, I love the smell of a nice rain out there. Everything just smells so good. So is that what it's talking about? I don't know. And prosperity and health. Number 9, and through the third portal line to the west comes forth dew and rain, locusts and desolation. So we know from the west is where at least we get most of our rain. In the southwest is from the west. And believe it or not, Israel the same way. They get most of their rain from the west. And but it also says locusts and desolation. So does that mean that when the western winds pick up and bring rain into the promised land, whatever, does that mean sometimes with it comes locusts? Possibility. And anytime you have hordes of locusts that turn the sky black, there's going to be desolation. They'll eat everything in their path. Locusts. I've seen biblical locusts when I've been in Israel. Up on the Golan Heights, I was up there, and we saw these big things crossing the road and hopping across the road. I said, what the heck is that? So we stopped the car, we got out and looked. They were giant-looking grasshoppers.
How big?
Well, I would say they were about that long, and they were green, and so I asked somebody there, says, what kind of grasshoppers are those? He goes, grasshoppers? Those are locusts. Oh. So you can imagine, you fill the sky till the sky's dark with those things like that. They eat everything in their path. But they look like big, green, giant grasshoppers. And according to the Bible, you can eat them. That's one of the very few insects that are out there that's kosher.
They taste like peanut butter.
Do they really? Have you eaten them?
Yes.
They taste like peanut butter. Who ate locusts? John the Baptist ate locusts. Yes, he did. It was a kosher meal. Well, I can imagine if you had a big onslaught of locusts, you could probably fill your pots and pans with an awful lot of food. Better than starving to death, right? Wow. Verse 10, after these north winds, from the seventh portal in the east comes dew, rain, locust. I already read that, didn't I? Okay, so let's move up to verse 12. And after these four are the west winds. Through the first portal adjoining the north comes forth dew and hoarfrost and cold and snow and frost. And from the middle portal comes forth dew and rain, prosperity and blessing. So it's interesting that all the portals on each direction of the compass produce something. And the middle ones is something always good. The middle one is always prosperity or something good. So you can get destruction from all the portals except for the middle portals of each direction. Now I can't explain the details on that. I don't understand how that works. But I can tell you, when I'm watching that BBC weather map in Israel showing all the weather all over the world, I was simply amazed at all the directions of the wind going. And you can see, the storms following this one and storms following that one, and wind currents going that way and those storms. And because if you ever look at a map on the world, there are certain sections of the world that's a certain belt that is brown. Like no rain, no nothing falls there ever. It's almost like it's one of the middle portals or one of the judgment portals of wind. They, half-inch rain a year or something. Some of all those places get. Looks really bad. But then you get outside those portals, you see all these green belts that are moving along. So hard to explain what Enoch is saying here because we don't know all the details and how they explained it back then. Okay. Okay, continue on with 13. And from the middle portal comes forth dew and rain, prosperity and blessing. And through the last portal, which adjoins the south, comes forth drought, desolation, and burning and destruction. And the 12 portals of the 4 quarters of the heavens are therewith completed, with all their laws and all their plagues and all their benefactions have I shown to thee, my son Methuselah. So Enoch's trying to teach Methuselah now all the stuff that he was shown. So he wrote down a lot of stuff, and now he's trying to teach Methuselah and to, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, to pass it on to generations. So what we got now is, what Methuselah passed on from Enoch. But, we don't know how corrupted all of it is, but it's certainly given us quite a bit of information. Next chapter, 77, verse 1. And the first quarter is called the east because it is the first. It's always interesting we talk about a compass. What direction do we always talk about first? North. We always go north, west, south, east, or northeast, southwest, or whatever, and but here in Enoch, it is known as the first. East is the first. The second is the south, because the Most High will descend there. So I thought that's interesting that the south quarter is where the Most High will descend. Okay. What does that mean? That the Most High will descend in the south? Anybody have any idea? What does it mean by the Most High will descend in the south quarter? If this is the same south that the Bible talks about, it tells you that in the land of Edom, which is south of Israel, it says God comes from Teman. Teman is a town in Edom that is south of Israel. And so we know it's not, the Father isn't what comes, it's the Son that comes. But nonetheless, it says God will come from Teman and from Bozrah with his garments dipped in blood. Why? Because he's come for judgment, or already started executing judgment. Both those are in towns in Edom, that's to the south. So I thought that's very interesting that Enoch actually said that he will descend in the south quarter. So if you think about Israel being the center and going with that south, he is certainly descending in the south. And that's where he comes from. He doesn't appear at the Mount of Olives first. He comes to the Mount of Olives, but he descends to the south in the land of Edom, not far from the real Mount Sinai. That's where he descends. Now, why does he descend there? If this is right, what Enoch's talking about, why does the Lord Yeshua descend in the south first? Because that's where he needs to defend the remnant. The remnant is fleeing probably for the real Mount Sinai, and they're cutting across Edom, chasing the remnant. And the Lord descends and destroys that army, the beast army that's chasing them. Read that in Revelation 12. And just like the book of Isaiah says that the remnant will flee out of Jerusalem and across the Jordan River and turn south to the Arnon River first. The Arnon River is a river that dumps halfway down the Dead Sea on the Jordan side. And it says, and say to the daughters of Arnon, watch after my people from the oppressor as they pass by. What oppressor? There certainly wasn't a remnant that was fleeing any other time that we know of in that direction. It has to be the last days remnant fleeing. And so at halfway down the Dead Sea on the Jordanian side, that Arnon River, the people that live in that area are actually commanded to watch after his people that are fleeing from the oppressor. Then it also says, give a lamb to Selah. Selah is Petra. So why do you give a gift give a lamb to the king of Selah? Why do you give a gift to a king at all? Because they are trying to appease him to let the remnant flee through there. It's all in the same verse. Just as they are on the way to the mount of the daughters of Zion. What mountain are they going to? Well, it's surely not any mountain in Jerusalem. They're running from Jerusalem. So what mountain are they going to? The only thing that makes any sense to me is the real Mount Sinai. So they're fleeing out of Jerusalem when the Mount of Olives splits in two. They're fleeing through that. They cross the Jordan River to the north of the Dead Sea. Once they cross over in the Jordan, they're fleeing south to the Arnon River, and they're going to wait there, and the people of the Arnon River is going to take care of them. Then they're going to continue south to Petra, and then from there probably to the real Mount Sinai. But the book of Revelation says that the beast chases that remnant to destroy it. And so it's chasing this remnant. Because the rest of the Israelites, he's either killed or led off into captivity. So he's chasing this remnant, and in the Lord, at that time, the Lord appears. God comes from Teman, and who is this? Comes out of Bozrah with his garments dipped in blood, and destroys that part of the beast's army that is chasing the remnant. So the Lord doesn't destroy the beast yet, but he destroys that army that's chasing the remnant. Then the remnant goes to Mount Sinai, and it tells you in Revelation 12, and God watches after them for 3.5 years. That's the Great Tribulation during that 3.5 years. It's known as the Great Tribulation. Even though there may be a tribulation for 7 years, it's the last 3.5 years that's really bad. So at that time, the beast is very angry that part of his army got destroyed, And then that's when it says he goes after those who have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Because he's already conquered Israel. He's already taken them, killed them either, or led into captivity, or the remnant got away from him. So he's going after the next group, the Christians. And the beast goes after them. And all over the world. And that's when he probably puts out the mark thing, because he wants to make sure he knows who everybody is. So, the tribulation unlike anything ever seen on the earth. And we don't want to be here for that. All right. For he descends from the south. It fits Scripture really well. He descends from the south. So that also kind of tells us that the focus point for directions is Israel. And that's what the Lord Enoch's talking about here. And the west quarter is named the diminished because there all the luminaries of the heaven wane and go down. Basically what he's saying is the sun and the moon all set in the west. That's an interesting question to ask people. What direction does the moon set? Most people know the sun sets in the west. Ask them what direction the moon sets. And I bet you 70% of the people don't have any idea. Well, it sets in the west too, just like the sun. But people haven't really thought about it. What direction does the moon set? Try it out, ask people. And you'll be surprised how many have no idea what direction the moon sets. 3, and the fourth quarter, named the north, is divided into 3 parts. First of them is for the dwelling of men. The second contained the seas of water, and the abyss and the forest and the rivers and darkness and clouds. And the third part contains the garden of righteousness. Now, if anybody understands what that means, I'm all ears. What does that mean? What is it, that the first is for the dwelling of men, the north? Does that mean that maybe the northern part of the world or continents was God established a situation where men can live? Of course, now we're scattered everywhere, but back then, maybe the northern areas were the most inhabitable areas on the earth. I don't know. But then the second contains seas of water in the north. How do you describe that? Contains seas of water in the north? And the abysses, that's probably more than likely just talking about the deep seas. The abysses, quite often in the Bible, the abyss is the deep oceans. And that's probably what it talks about. And forests and rivers and darkness and clouds. And the third part contains the garden of righteousness. So, go figure. What does any of that mean? We don't know. We weren't there. We don't know exactly what Enoch's trying to say. And
So that's other than the garden in heaven.
well, it's probably talking about the garden still on the earth. The garden on the earth does not leave until the flood. The Garden of Eden is a spiritual garden. And it's on the earth, and it's taken up and taken away before the flood comes. So now that same garden is in the third paradise. It's still like same garden, but it's a spiritual garden that God allowed Adam and Eve to be in to show that this is what God had it intended. A garden that does not corrupt, a garden no leaves die on it, nothing dies on it. It's kind of like what our bodies are going to be like, our incorruptible bodies. We are going to have bodies that can be touched. Yet we can walk through walls. And yet we can beam me up, Scotty, and go wherever we want to go, And it's the best of both worlds. The angels always want to be like men, and men always want to be like angels. Well, I have news for everybody. We're going to have the best of both worlds. We can be touched. Was Yeshua touched after his resurrection? Yes, he was. He can be touched, and this is debatable, but some people say Yeshua ate with the disciples on the Sea of Galilee. And when wow. All right, let's try that again. It worked. Working still? Yep. All right, good. Thought it was clipped. It wasn't clipped. But, and I stood at that place again when I was in Israel last week. The place where Yeshua cooked breakfast for Peter and the disciples. Remember after he told them to meet him in the Galilee after his resurrection? So Peter was out fishing. That's what he does. He fish. He's from Capernaum. Peter was not a poor man. Peter had several ships and had hired help. He was not a poor man that everybody tries to make out. All the disciples were dirt poor. That just shows that Yeshua came for the poor. No. Peter was not poor, and more than likely Matthew or Levi was not poor either. And maybe many of the others were not poor. So it's a bad idea to try to around and use social theology to try to say that all the disciples were poor, that the Lord just came for the poor. No, it's not true at all. Peter was not poor. He had a nice house in Capernaum, hired help, and fished. And so there's a place there in Israel on the Galilee, not far from Capernaum, and where they say this is the spot that Yeshua cooked breakfast for the disciples. And it just so happened while we were standing there, right on the shore, and I've been there many times, that same spot, but when you're standing there on that shore, some boats started coming by. And we were thinking, I wonder if I could yell and they could hear me on those boats. Because obviously, Yeshua hollered at them. I kept thinking, well, they're probably almost in range of voice. Maybe they were a little closer than that, but it made you think about it. As the boats were going to go right by Capernaum, where Peter was from. And Peter was probably sailing in that direction, heading home, when Yeshua hollered at him, cooking them breakfast. So in our new incorruptible bodies, we can at least cook breakfast, because we are supposed to be like Yeshua, right? So it's wonderful that we will have bodies that sees no death, no corruption, all pain will be gone, and we'll probably all look about the same age, probably. And it's funny because one time I was given a message about that, about our incorruptible bodies. And I said, I don't know about you, but I want to get rid of this body. I want a new body. Does everybody want a new body? And then some 14-year-old girl over goes, I don't. I like myself. Okay. I'll give you that. But everybody else says, yeah, I'm ready to get rid of this body, and get something new. And Yeshua is going to do that for us. So marvelous, marvelous things are coming. Okay, page 166, verse 4. And I saw 7 high mountains, higher than all the mountains which are on the earth. And thence comes forth hoarfrost, days, seasons, and years pass away. I have no idea what he is talking about. Like I said before, this is the hardest concept I had with Enoch, is dealing with the sun, the moon, and the luminaries, because it's so cryptic, it's hard to grab a hold of. Verse 5, and I saw 7 rivers on the earth larger than all the rivers. One of them coming from the west pours its water into the great sea. Coming from the west pours its water into the great sea. The commentary writers here say that's the Nile, but the Nile doesn't come from the west. The Nile comes from the south and dumps into the sea. So I don't know how they can say it's the Nile. And these two come from the north to the sea and pour the waters into the Thracian Sea in the east. We do have 2 large rivers that do come from the north in that area that dumps into the sea. Anybody know what they might be? Tigris and Euphrates. Tigris-Euphrates River do dump into the Thracian Sea, which could be that Indian Ocean, Persian Gulf area and all that. So very possible that could be those. And the remaining 4 come forth on the side of the north to their own sea, 2 of them to the Thracian Sea, and 2 into the great sea, and discharge themselves there. And some say into the desert. You know, the commentary people say that's probably the Indus River, the Ganges River, the Oxus River, and Jahartas River that are probably all around the Caspian Sea and India and all those things. That's strictly guessing. We have no idea. Got to remember, this is before Noah's flood. During Noah's flood, everything changed. The land, the continents probably separated. Everything changed. So we have no idea what the landscape looked like prior to that. Verse 8, 7 great islands I saw in the sea and in the mainland, 2 in the mainland and 5 in the great sea. What does it mean by 7 great islands? Are they talking about continents? What's he talking about? I don't know. How many continents do we have? Depends on your interpretation, I guess. Well, you know, we have the North, South America continents. We have Africa. We have Europe. They considered Australia is probably a continent. Then you have, you know, Asia, which includes Russia. So that's 6. So what's that? England, is that considered as part of the Europe continent, or? Yeah. So we don't know what the 7 islands, what he's referring to here is. Is it part of the continents or what? We don't know. All right, moving on to 78, verse 1. And the names of the sun are the following. The first is Orjares and the second Tamas. So when they break those words down into Hebrew, it appears to indicate winter and summer. So they probably have 2 different names for the sun according to the 2 main seasons everybody thinks about is winter and summer. Probably because when it's summer, it's like, this can't be the same sun we just had 6 months ago. We're going to call it a different name. So apparently back in those days, they had names for the seasons of the sun to fit the sun. Verse 2, and the moon has 4 names. The first is Asanjah, the second is Ebla, the third is Benassi, the fourth is Ire. And they're probably the same thing. The major waxing of the moon, the full, the new moon, and the middle range of the moons. Maybe they had different names for them. Could it be because you know, when it's full, it looks like there's a man in the moon, and then, so they get a name for the man in the moon when it's full, versus when it's not full. These are the 2 great luminaries. Their circumference is like the circumference of the heaven. In other words, saying they move, and the size of the circumference of both is alike. Verse 4, in the circumference of the sun there are 7 portions of light which are added to it more than the moon. Well, this is very interesting because it actually says that the sun is 7 times brighter than the moon. I don't know how to measure that. I don't know if that's true or not. But we know the moon doesn't put out its own light. It only gets its light from the sun. But as far as looking at it from the earth, if you added 7 times light to the moon, would it be as bright as the sun? Interesting. We do know what during the millennial reign, it says the sun itself will be 7 times brighter during the millennial reign. Now, how can it be? If there's flesh on the earth, they'll be destroyed. What does it mean by the sun will be 7 times brighter in the millennial reign? Is it talking about the new Jerusalem being 7 times brighter than the sun? Is it talking about that? Possibly. But obviously the people on the flesh on the earth during that time are not going to be able to survive if the sun is 7 times brighter. Or is it talking about after the millennial reign? After all the judgments are over and all the sinners are destroyed and everybody's in a resurrected body, everybody can handle a sun that's 7 times brighter by that point. So is it talking about after the great white throne judgment, after the millennial reign? I wouldn't doubt that God has put scriptures in there about that period of time, and we're always trying to lump it in to everything prior to the great white throne judgment. Maybe some of those scriptures we read in there apply to after the millennial reign. Just keep that in mind when you're reading things, Where does it apply? Does it apply now, the millennial reign, or is it after the millennial reign? Certainly the sun being 7 times brighter cannot possibly be during the millennial reign, because people will be born and die on the earth. As they'll live longer, and no baby will die. That's a promise of the millennial reign. But people will still be born on the earth to repopulate the earth after the tribulation. So if the sun goes 7 times hotter, no flesh can handle that. No flesh can handle it. If God makes a covenant with the beast, where mankind can deal with even the poisonous and the ravenous beasts, the beast couldn't survive a sun that's 7 times brighter too. So when and where, so either it's symbolism, maybe talking about the New Jerusalem, because the New Jerusalem is going to look like the sun. It's going to be so bright. So is it talking about that? Or is it after the millennial reign? So sometimes we dismiss scriptures like that. There's no explanation for it, but I believe there are some scriptures in there that are probably talking about after the millennial reign. So keep that in mind when you're studying things like that. So, in its definite measures, it is transferred to the 7th portion of the sun is exhausted. All right, verse 5, and they set and entered the portals of the west to make the revolution by the north and come forth through the eastern portals on the face of heaven. So, I don't understand how they enter the portals of the west. Everything sets in the west and makes a revolution by the north. I have no idea what this is talking about. And come forth through the eastern portals on the face of heaven. Verse 6, and when the moon rises, 1/14th part appears in the heaven. So in other words, when it's talking about the new moon, when that little sliver of a thumbnail appears, it's 1/14th of its brightness is what it's saying. So you can ask that question of people too. It says, well, compared to the full moon's brightness, how bright is the new moon? According to Enoch, 1/14th. On the 14th day, she accomplishes her light, and 15 parts of light are transferred to her till the 15th day, when her light is accomplished. In other words, when it's full, according to the sign of the year, and she becomes 15 parts, and the moon grows by the addition of the 14th parts. So when the new moon appears, that's the 15th, and then 14 more parts are going to be added after that. Verse 8, and in her waning, the moon decreases on the first day to 14 parts of her light, and on the second to the 13th part of light, and on the third to the 12th, on the 4th to the 11th, on the 5th to the 10th, on the 6th to the 9th, and the 7th to the 8th, the 8th to the 7th, the 9th to the 6th, the 10th to the 5, the 11th to the 4th, the 12th to 3, the 13th to the 2, the 14th to the half of a 7th, and all remaining light disappears wholly on the 15th. So the moon disappears on the 15th. Then starts the new moon. And in certain months, the month has 29 days and once 28. So that's interesting. How does the moon do that? How does the moon have 29 days and in one time have 28 days? Go figure. But we've not been able to set our calendars, every month having the same number of days. That's where you get the idea of a blue moon. You might know what a blue moon is? A blue moon is the second full moon in a month, because our calendar days are too long to keep it the same on every day. And so when we have calendar days that are 30 and 31, eventually, at least probably a couple of times a year, you're going to get 2 full moons in a month. It doesn't fit, but nonetheless, that's our calendar we use today. But that's why things don't always fall exactly the same every time. Okay. Okay. Verse 9. And in certain months, the month has 29 days and once 28. Verse 10. And Uriel showed me another law. When light is transferred to the moon, on which side it is transferred to her by the sun. Has anybody ever seen the back side of the moon? No. Not from here. Maybe in space. Way out there in space. So interesting, Enoch knows that. Enoch knows we only see one side of the moon at any time. We have no idea what's on the other side. From Earth anyway. So that's interesting how the moon faces the Earth all the time it's rotating. It stays facing the Earth on one side all the time. So, wow. How come the moon isn't doing this? We see all the sides as it's going around us. No, it doesn't. It stays facing the Earth the whole time as it goes around. Very interesting how God set this up. Verse 11, during all the period during which the moon is growing in her light, she is transferring it to herself when opposite to the sun during the 14 days her light is accomplished in the heaven. And when she is illumined throughout, her light is accomplished in the heaven. Verse 12, and on the first day she is called the new moon, for on that day light rises upon her. She becomes full moon exactly on the day when the sun sets in the west. All right, so that's absolutely true. When we see the full moon out there, it's because it's after the sun is set. The sun sets in the west. And that moon will start to rise out of the east, and you see that full moon. And when it's on the horizon, it's a supermoon. The reason it's called a supermoon is because there's more atmosphere multiplying the light from where you're looking at. So it becomes a supermoon. And it rises out of the east. That's another question you can ask people. The moon rises in what direction of the compass? See if they get that right. Okay. And from the east she rises at night, and the moon shines the whole night through till the sun rises over against her, and the moon is seen over against the sun. On the side whence the light of the moon comes forth, there again she wanes till all the light vanishes, and all the days of the month are at an end, and her circumference is empty, void of light. Verse 15, and 3 months she makes of 30 days, and at her time she makes 3 months of 29 days each, which she accomplished her waning in the first period of time, in the first portal for 177 days. These are correct statements, and so Enoch certainly understood the calendars and how they work. And in the time of her going out, she appears for 3 months of 30 days each, and 3 months she appears 29 each. At night she appears like a man for 20 days each time. By the day she appears like the heaven. There's nothing else in her save her light. Yeah, so that's exactly what takes place with the moon. All right, let's take a break here. Brian, we're going to take a break right now. Where'd I leave off at? All right. Verse 15? Or no, we did that one. Okay.
15.
I left off on 15? Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, 16.
16. Okay, verse 16. In the time of her going out, she appears for 3 months, of 30 days each. For 3 months she appears of 29 each. 17. At night she appears like a man for 20 days each time, and by day she appears like the heaven, and there is nothing else in her save her light. Okay, so now we're going to be at 79, verse 1. And now my son, that's Methuselah, we're still talking about Methuselah here. I have shown thee everything, and the law of the stars of the heaven is completed. And he showed me all the laws of these for every day, and for every season of bearing rule, and for every year, and for its going forth, for the order prescribed to it every month and every week. And the waning of the moon, which takes place in the sixth portal. All right, for this, probably when you talk about these portals, like 12 portals, you know, is it talking about portals in the sky like this, in the waning of the moon, or is it talking about portals going this way, latitude or longitude? Which way is it talking? Don't know really. For in this sixth portal her light is accomplished, and after that is the beginning of the waning. And the waning which takes place in the first portal in its season till 177 days are accomplished, reckoned according to weeks, 70 or 25 weeks and 2 days. And she falls behind the sun in the order of the stars exactly 5 days in the course of one period. When this place which you see has been traversed. 6. Such is the picture and sketch of every luminary which Uriel, the archangel, who is her leader, showed unto me. I think it would be very interesting if, you know, an astronomy expert would look at this and plot it all out. I bet you he could figure out something that would just amaze him. When it looks confusing to us, and it gets probably plotted out by somebody who really understands this stuff, it could be very interesting.
That possibly talking about the sun when it comes to the longest day, and then it goes toward the shortest.
It could be. The question was, is these portals like when the sun comes to the longest day of the year in June 21st to the shortest day of the year in December 21st, and equinox in the middle, all that, are those all portals? Very possible. So you would have the one in the summer, one in the winter, and the equinoxes, and then the ones in between. So it's possible. All right. We're talking here now about 80, verse 1. And in those days the angel Uriel answered and said to me, Behold, I have shown you everything, Enoch, and I revealed everything to you that you should see this sun and this moon, and the leader of the stars of the heaven, and all those who turn them, their task, times, and departures. So angels are assigned to all these things. The angels are assigned to make sure the moon never changes its course. The sun and moon never change their course. The stars don't change their course. That everything remains in order. That's why it's always been said, God is a God of order. He put these angels out there not to allow anything to change. So that's why what we have today is pretty much what's been here for 6,000 years. Everything out there. All right, verse 2. And in the days of the sinners, the years shall be shortened. All right, so this next section is kind of interesting. In the days of the sinners, the years shall be shortened. Where else do we hear about time being shortened? Tribulation. All right, so Yeshua himself said that the days will be shortened during this period of time of tribulation. At least there will be no flesh alive on earth. Whoa, stop and think about that for a moment. God has to shorten the time or there'll be nobody left alive on the earth. Now that's a tribulation. You stop and think about it. that the possibility of everybody on the earth being destroyed, that God has to shorten the days so that doesn't happen. Is this what this is talking about? Probably so. In the days of the sinners, the years shall be shortened, and their seed shall be tardy on their lands and fields, and all things on the earth shall alter. So things are going to change in the tribulation, all over the heavens and the earth. This is why it says in Daniel chapter 12, a tribulation will come unlike anything man has ever seen before. And those are not just, little nice statements. It really means we've never seen anything that's coming on the earth. Far worse than the wars, far worse than the Holocaust, far worse than anything we can imagine is coming on the earth. And shall not appear in their time. So in other words, crops that are to be planted will not appear when they're supposed to appear. So as we just read about these luminaries, that all these portals are for seasons and times and purposes, they get mixed up. They get messed up. The seasons and times begin to change. That's a scary thought. That the farmer goes out to plant his seed and the weather ain't right, or things aren't right. Whatever, things begin to change, which brings about probably huge droughts and huge famine upon the earth. And of course, what do we read about the 4 horsemen of apocalypse? And that's exactly what they bring. Wars and pestilence and famine on the earth. And those 4 horsemen of apocalypse are angels. They're the generals. Let me put it that way. They're the generals. The 200 million that come are probably the lesser angels that join with them against the earth. So when they talk about 200 million, now if you're a Hal Lindsey fan, he always said it was Chinese. It's not Chinese. It's spiritual armies. The 4 horsemen of apocalypse are the generals. And there are 200 million angel soldiers are what are coming to destroy things on the earth. That's why Joel 2 talks about the army of the Lord coming that never break their ranks. They never die. They run over the walls, over the fences, over the houses. They don't die. They don't even break rank. So this 200 million is not Chinese army. Stop and think about it logically. Sometimes you have to always put the logic in there to think about things like this. If a 200 million army was marching across China, first of all, they could not even possibly take care of a 200 million man army. Logistics would be insane. But how easy it would be to drop a couple of atomic bombs right in the middle of them and end that real quick. They're not people. That's what I always say and teach, and I stick to it. They're not people. The 200 million that's coming are not people. And so, because people can be destroyed. So many nations with nuclear weapons today, you could take care of an army like that with a handful of nuclear weapons and it would cease to exist. These people, whatever it is that's coming, these creatures are spiritual. If they're not angels, there's some other kind of a spiritual creatures that are coming. But the 4 angels of apocalypse are their generals. That brings the war and the famine. Because that's what it says in Joel 2. It says that it could be, the land before them can be as the Garden of Eden and then a desert behind them. They come through wiping everything out, burning everything up, destroying everything. And they don't die, nor do they break from ranks. Does that sound like a human being? No, it's not a human being. Of course, today with today's technology and they're making robots, can it be robots? Well, there's always a possibility it could be robot soldiers. But even robots would have a hard time climbing walls and over houses. But you can't, we have to consider those concepts. But that 200 million is not Chinese. Now, can China send a 1 million man army over? Probably. Not 200 million. The logistics in trying to house and feed 200 million soldiers is just beyond comprehension. The amount of people it would take just to do that would certainly increase that number hugely. And China today cannot put together a 200 million man army. They may be able to put together a 5 million man army, but they're not going to put together a 200 million man army. So thank you, Hal Lindsey, for bringing it to our attention, but that isn't the way it's going to be. All right. And when you read in the Bible the kings of the east and how Lindsey uses, that's not even in the same section with the 200 million in Revelation. So he reached way out here about the kings of the east and brought it to the 200 million, but there's nothing in the Bible that relates the two together. So, and when you're teaching prophecy, a lot of times the first thing you start learning about prophecy is what you hang on to and remember. I was one of them. Hal Lindsey was the first guy I ever studied prophecy under with his books. And it took me a while to rethink things, say, well, thank you, Hal Lindsey, but that isn't quite right. And you have to reformulate your paradigms and create a paradigm shift in your head that you have to take all the scriptures together and look at it all together and not pick and choose the things that make a sensational concept for you. And so, yeah, the 200 million is not Chinese. All right. And the rain shall be kept back. Whoa. So when the day of the sinners has come, rain will be withheld, is what it's saying here. Because everything starts to change in the heavens and the earth, and all the cycles and seasons will go crazy on us. And the rain will hold back. And the heavens shall withhold it. Verse 3. And in those times the fruits of the earth shall be backwards, and shall not grow in their time. And the fruit of the trees shall be withheld in their time. So when everybody's got all these seeds they're going to plant in the tribulation, and all these fruit trees they got in their yard and everything else, say, well, I'm going to survive the tribulation. Au contraire, God's going to change it all. He's going to change how seeds grow, how fruit produces, how the seasons are. The whole world goes into a turmoil. And you're expecting fruit on your trees, it ain't going to happen when this day comes. This day of the Lord, another way to put it. So everybody that's preparing and thinking, I'm ready for it, got news for you. You need to be ready with the Lord. That's what you need to be ready for. So any of you out there watching this program online, you need to be ready for the Lord, not be ready to try to survive the tribulation. Amen. Okay. Verse 4, and the moon shall alter her order and not appear at her time. When the Yeshua said, those days come to be signs in heaven, he literally meant big time signs in the heavens. We're not talking about an eclipse. We're not talking about a comet. We're talking about heavens completely readjusting themselves in the sky. Total chaos in the skies. These are the signs of heaven that's coming. We like to think, oh, well, we had this eclipse. You know, we had eclipse right on a feast day. Yeah, those can be signs, but it's not this. When the signs begin to change in the heavens for the tribulation, it's going to be major. That's going to change. Verse 5, in those days the sun shall be seen, and he shall journey in the evening on the extremity of the great chariot in the west, and shall shine more brightly than a cord with the order of light. So the moon's course and path is going to change, and its brightness is going to change. Who controls all of that stuff? We learn in Joel 2, verse 10, that the sun and the moon will go dark, and the stars will hold their shining. Of course, the old prophecy writer says, well, that's because all the nuclear bombs going off and all the dirt in the air. Oh, okay, well, let's continue. Amos 8:9 says, the sun will go down at noon and darken the earth in a clear day. That has nothing to do with nuclear explosions. Yes, sir.
This is describing what will happen if the magnetic poles shift.
That's very possible. He was saying if the magnetic poles shift, that this could describe what's happening. But this, you can't, any kind of thought we can give that it be man-made is ridiculous, whether by bombs, nuclear explosions, whatever. This is not what's going to cause the sun and moon to go dark. The Lord's going to cause the sun and moon to go dark, and even to go down, set at noon. So to set at noon, something huge has happened in the cosmos to cause that. Not some war upon the earth. Super volcano, yeah. Maybe it explodes, and with the jet stream coming out of the volcano, like physics, will cause the earth to rotate differently. I don't know, you know. But
Whatever anybody wonders, there's always a comet.
it's always a comet. Yeah, they always say a comet will do it. Yeah. So if Enoch is right here, we must understand that this upheaval in the cosmos and universe is God-inspired and not man-inspired. You know, it's not going to be wars, not going to be nuclear blasts that does this stuff. God causes it because he's did an upheaval and everything that we know dealing with the sun and the moon and the cosmos. This is why men will die of fear upon the earth when this all starts happening. Verse 6. And many chiefs of the stars shall transgress their order, and shall alter their orbits and tasks, and not appear at the seasons prescribed to them. So the angels are controlling all this stuff, and they will change it. Verse 7, and the whole order of the stars will be concealed from the sinners, and the thoughts of those on the earth shall err concerning them. We're just kind of talking about that. Man will try to find some rational, natural explanation what's happening. And there may be natural explanations, but I tell you, it's God doing it. Whether we can explain it in the natural or not, it's God doing it. And they shall be altered from all their ways. Yea, they shall err and take them to be gods. So these chief of the stars, apparently we're talking about fallen angels again here, that have control of these things, are going to create a dismay like we've never seen before. Probably the fifth level of heaven, all those angels that are waiting at the fifth level could be come down. When a third of the stars are cast the earth with Satan, is probably when it all starts to happen. See, people don't understand, all the different angel factions out there. The angels that came and messed with mankind that Enoch was talking about are not the same angels that are with Satan. They're not the same angels. There's a lot of angels that sinned, and they've been locked away into the pits of the earth, those bad angels. Satan's still roaming around. He's still a devouring lion. He's still an accuser of the brethren, and he's got all his bad angels with him. But in Revelation 12, him and his bad angels are thrown to the earth. And if some of those angels are in control of some of these things, they're now cast to the earth. And God is either going to have to put other angels to control these things, or chaos assumes. And God may allow chaos to assume for a while. Satan was kicked out of the throne room of God because of his pride, because he wanted to be like God, because he refused to acknowledge Adam as the image of God. But he wasn't kicked out of all the heavens. If Enoch's right, there's 10 levels of heaven, but Enoch considers a lot of other dimensions as a level of heaven. In the book, The Ascension of Isaiah, he describes actually passing through 7 levels. And so that seems to be the common thought With most rabbis, there are 7 levels of heaven. Because Enoch included, the places of judgment and everything else as being a level. But if there's 7 levels, Satan got thrown out of the 7th level, which where God dwelt, and he was thrown down. I don't know how far, but he was thrown down. When Yeshua said, I saw Satan falling like lightning from the sky, when the disciples were casting out demons, that means he probably fell another level or 2. But he's still the prince of the air until Revelation 12, where he is thrown to the earth. Once he's thrown to the earth, he's lost all his dominion in the heavenly realm. Now, another thing to consider is, just like Adam and Eve, when they were cast out of the garden, they turned completely flesh and blood. They were in incorruptible bodies while they were in the garden. When they got cast out of the garden, their bodies become corrupted. They were going to die. Death now came on the scene. So is that possible God would do the same thing with Satan? When he's cast to the earth, they assume physical bodies, that they no longer will be the prince of the air. They no longer be able to do what they used to do. And so now they use their abilities and talents now to create destruction on the earth in the physical. So the beast of Revelation, is that just describing Satan now in some kind of physical form on the earth? Possibly. Still has the power of Satan, but could we just describe in his physical form? Who knows? These are all things we have to speculate over. Once Satan is thrown to the earth, he says he comes with great wrath because he knows his time is short now. He probably enjoyed having his heavenly kingdoms, but that was just taken away from him when he gets thrown to the earth. So he probably enjoyed being worshipped and honored by the other fallen angels. But once he gets thrown to the earth, he's mad now. He hates mankind because mankind caused him to fall from the throne of God. When he refused to recognize Adam as the image of God, he blames man now, any seed of Adam, which is all of us, as his enemy. And that's why he's the accuser of the brethren. So once he's thrown out of heaven, he can no longer talk to God and accuse us like he used to do. But now he comes with great wrath when he gets thrown down upon the earth. I don't want to be here when that happens. And so if the beast is his physical form, who can make war against the beast? No one. No one. You can't shoot him. You can't kill him. You can't nuke him. You can't do anything to him. There's only one person that'll destroy him, and that's the Messiah. And if he takes on a physical form, he will destroy that. The Messiah will destroy that physical form and then throw his spirit into the lake of fire, the first inhabitant into the lake of fire. So this is where a lot of times the confusion comes from, because you can read in Isaiah that the bad guy to come, that his body will be given to the maggots and everything else. Well, how do you explain it that the Lord throws him in the lake of fire? So you got to reconcile the two. That tells you that he'll probably have a physical form, and he still has a spirit. And so the Lord destroys his physical form and then takes his spirit and throws it in the lake of fire. Makes more sense to make the scriptures fit one another about how this guy is judged and done away with. Anyway. Interesting, it is all evil that's going to happen there. And verse 8, and evil shall be multiplied upon them. Sorry, when the transgressors are full. And punishment shall come upon them so as to destroy all. All right. So now, such a nice little chapter. We'll go to chapter 81, verse 1. And he said to me, observe, Enoch, these heavenly tablets, and read what is written thereon, and mark every individual fact. And I observed the heavenly tablets and read everything which was written thereon, and understood everything, and read the book of all the deeds of mankind, and of all the children of flesh that shall be upon the earth, to the remotest generations. So there's a book. There's a book recorded for people that aren't even born yet. So when it says God knows everything from the beginning to the end, he really does know everything from the beginning to the end. Verse 3, and forthwith I bless the great Lord, the King of glory forever, in that he made all the works of the world. And I extolled the Lord because of his patience, and blessed him because of the children of men. And after that I said, blessed is the man who dies in righteousness and goodness, concerning whom there is no book of unrighteousness written, and against whom no day of judgment shall be found. So Enoch is basically saying that the righteous, there's no book of unrighteousness written about them. Our unrighteous works will be revealed to us, but then quickly destroyed. But there's no book to hold us in a court of law. And so there is no judgment upon us, because Yeshua took it all. And so it'll only be revealed temporarily to us, basically let us know the great work that the Messiah did for us. But to the sinners, that books, all their works are written down, and they'll be held accountable for it. They do not have Yeshua for that forgiveness. Verse 5, and those 7 holy ones brought me and placed me on the earth before the door of my house, and said to me, declare everything to your son Methuselah, and show to all your children that no flesh is righteous in the sight of the Lord. Well, we certainly have read that in scriptures in Romans. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Job 9:2, how should man be just with God? Psalms 14:1, there is none that does good. The Bible talks about that all over the place, that there is none that is righteous in the sight of the Lord, for he is their creator. Thank you, Yeshua. 1 year we will leave thee with thy son, till thou givest thy last commands, that you may teach thy children, recorded for them, and testify to all thy children. In the 2nd year they shall take thee from their midst. In other words, the angel is telling Enoch, take this stuff here and write it all down and teach your children, teach your son Methuselah, because there's coming a time you'll be taken from their midst. So Enoch went up, saw all this stuff, become a scribe, write it all down, teach it to his family, and there's a time coming where God removes him again. And then he's never seen again. And as some people say, they believe he's one of the 2 witnesses that come in Revelation. Because him and Elijah are 2 that never died. And Scripture says, all must die. So it appears that, at least what I'm thinking, Elijah and Enoch are the 2 witnesses that come, because they die in Jerusalem by the beast. And so makes sense. But we don't know. We don't know for sure if the 2 witnesses are these 2 guys. But I'm willing to say it probably is. Seven, let thy heart be strong, for the good shall announce righteousness to the good. The righteous with the righteous shall rejoice, and shall offer congratulations to one another. Congratulations to all of you. You made it. 8, but sinners shall die with the sinners, and the apostate go down with the apostate. And those who practice righteousness shall die on account of the deeds of men. So what 9 is saying is that you're going to be persecuted. You're going to be persecuted. It's happening all over the world and even picking up. I was reading an article the other day that said in no time in history have they seen so many Christians being persecuted around the world. Places Christians thought they were safe, they're being killed. And even in the United States now, to be a Christian is a liability. We're seeing this pick up. By the deeds of men is what Enoch says. It is the deeds of men that is causing this to take place. And shall be taken away on account of doing of the godless. And in those days they ceased to speak to me. I came to my people blessing the Lord of the world. Wow. Okay. Well, I guess we better stop there. All righty, homework. Get my pen to write again here. All right. All right, let me figure out the homework here because we didn't get as far as I thought, so I have to readjust the homework assignment. All right. I continue reading on from 174 to 190. Page 190. Start at 174 to page 190. And we'll pick it up next week. I don't foresee missing any Enochs for any time close unless Rosh Kodesh falls on it or something. So we're really not that far away from finishing. I figure at this rate we're going, it will probably be done by June. That's not very far away, really. Well, we'll figure out what we want to do at that point, what everybody wants to do.
Take a summer break or whatever.
There's so many requests what people want to do. We'll have to talk about it and see what everybody wants to do. We could do Baruch. We could do the pseudepigraphical of Jeremiah. We could do the books of Adam and Eve. Some want to start a discipleship class on Tuesday. So just kind of figure out what everybody wants to do and what the Lord really wants, where he wants us to go. But we'll be doing something. We may take a break for the rest of the summer, but we'll do something, particularly when summer is over. Amen? All right.